My dad had driven an older Porsche way back in the early 80s. He drove the SCs, possibly an original Carrera. He loved how it handled, couldn't afford it at the time. And so he ended up getting a Corvette. He got an '83 Corvette, which, lasted till he had kids, had myself and adopted my sister. And, he loved the Corvette, but he always kind of wanted to go back to the Porsche because, as him and my mom would always say, is it handled like it was on train track. He was 100% a car guy, but he didn't like turning a wrench. So he knew that, at his stage in his life, he couldn't quite afford it. He sort of put himself through law school, became an attorney. He worked for Hitachi Data Systems for 12 years, and after his time with Hitachi. And so that's really what led to him wanting to purchase a 911. He, at the time, this was 2001 when he was looking. They had just released the 2002 design. So the problem was it was $30,000 more to get, the almost 100 horsepower. And so that was his dilemma. And he goes, he was looking at the 0 to 60 times. He was looking at all this, all the car and driver reviews and things on the new car coming out. And he was like, am I gonna tell the difference when I'm on the highway cruising with this thing if it's, got, this or that? And the answer was really no. They were very involved in the Porsche Club and going on drives and going to parade, and we would autocross it. I mean, it was the first manual car that I ever drove, and it, I took it to prom. Yeah, so my dad and I had a game that we played, and it was which car? We would just go, okay, well, between Ford Mustang or an Audi A5. That was kind of our bonding, as we would talk about, well, this one's better because it's got this or that, the suspension's better. That one, the body's crap, but the engine's great. But yeah, the dealership was very draining. The salesman wanted to go through every single feature on the car. Every button, every, this is what it does. And I loved it. I ate it up because when the year prior, I had gone with my uncle to pick up his Ferrari 360, and it was used. It was like a 2000 model, coupe, red, really nice, beautiful car. And I, the next day, spent the whole day just flipping through the owner's manual and reading up all about all the features on the car, right? Because I was just curious, it's you don't really get access, especially early 2000s, to that kind of data really prevalently. And you don't really go look it up. You don't go, oh, well, let me go look up the owner's manual for a Ferrari Testarossa or, something like that, right? It's kind of rare to get your hands on that stuff. My dad put about $10,000 worth of options on it, and he goes, all I get is a gear shifter and the handbrake lever and some dials. That was, he got the logo in the headrests and the colored crests on the wheels and all of that. He was really into watching it get shipped to us. It was a 6-month process because when he got the car, the port of Long Beach was closed. They were on strike. And so Porsche was trying to figure out how to get the cars to California. And so what they had to do is it was delayed 2 weeks because it got stuck in Panama Canal, had to go back around, and they dropped it off in New York, I think, New Jersey, and trained it across the country, and then got them to the dealers that way. So they had to redo their whole supply chain because of the strike that they had. So that cost a month or so just waiting for the car. Yeah, so for, a while, I drove it after I got the car from my dad after he passed away. I fixed a few little things that needed a wheel bearing and a couple of sway bar end links, some coils, things like that. It needed kind of standard maintenance stuff. One day I went to go start the car, pushed the clutch in, felt a little odd pushing the clutch in, and it wouldn't do anything. It wouldn't click. It's not like a dead battery or anything like that. and it wasn't engaging the clutch pedal switch because of the throwout bearing having an issue. And so I was like, great, a $50 part that's going to cost me $5,000, basically, or something close to that, right? Exactly. So, I kind of looked at it and I said, well, I guess this is a good opportunity. I can use my shop. I can, take a look at the engine. There's a lot of information that was already out there on, removing engines, doing this service. And then I was like, well, if I'm in there, I'm going to do the clutch. I'm going to do the flywheel because it had 120,000 miles on it, or near about. And I was like, well, the flywheel is probably bad. My dad had the clutch replaced at 20,000 miles when they had done some of that rear main seal service. So that was, rear main seal, RMS, IMS. Okay, well, we'll take a look. I guess air oil separator as well, because you're in there and it's hard to get to. It was like kind of amassing this project list of, well, while I'm in there, might as well kind of do this. And so I, was successful taking the engine out. I had really no issues with the rebuild, the taking it out, anything like that. Everything went very smoothly. It was very, kind of straightforward for all the replacement stuff. But I did spend a very long time cleaning everything underneath the car. It gave me an opportunity to pull all the pans off and spend 200 hours of cleaning and repairing. I mean, it was a long time. I would kind of come down in the afternoons. I was working at home at the time. 3 o'clock, I'd come down, work for a couple hours, then go and have dinner and, kind of forget about it till the next day. And that was, a great kind of experience. And I thought, well, while I'm doing this, I might as well enter into a concours. Because, my dad had been active with the Porsche Club. He loved concours cars. He just absolutely drooled over them. He thought, it was a very special type of person that had to own one to be that clean and to go to a concours. But I was like, this car for 100,000 miles, 120,000 miles is almost immaculate. I mean, it has a handful, literally, of rock chips or things because it had a clear bra on the front. I took that off, cleaned everything up. It was, it's very pristine. So I was like, what, I'll go and I'll go check out the cars and just use it as an excuse to give me a deadline to say, okay, this is when this has to be done. Right, I want to be done so that I can go to the concours. They have it up at the little grassy airfield up here. Yeah. Beautiful location. I was like, I just want to check it out. So did that, did everything to it, ran really good. Spent a while bleeding the system for the coolant. That's sort of that's a struggle, I think, on any of these. Got it running, did all the bleeding, took it for some short drives, took it to the concours, did really well. I think 138.6 out of 140 for the rookie class. I mean, it's pretty good. I got my first place medal for my rookie experience. Took it to an autocross like the next weekend. Ran great. I mean, I've autocrossed the car several times in its lifetime, so I really enjoy that. And it worked. Well, it worked great. I drove it around. I went to the city, to Atlanta and back, and did a few drives here and there. It was about 400 miles later. I went to my second autocross.
Yes, I was about to say, it was on another
autocross. The second autocross, I drove great going out there. The first turn of my first run, it launched fine, turned it in, and the dash lit up like a World War II airplane getting struck by enemy fire. So yeah, I mean, all hell broke loose. It was misfiring really bad. The first thought in my mind was, how do I get it outside of the autocross so that my insurance will look at it and be like, oh yeah, sure, but I mean, honestly, that was just sort of a fleeting thought because I sort of knew right away what the issue was. The first thing that went through my head was coils, the coil packs. I was like, nah, maybe one of those slipped off, went bad, cracked, something simple, right? That would be easily repairable. I did have my my OBD2 scanner with me, so I did see it was just a misfire code in 2 cylinders, and I was like, serious if it's 2, more than 1, right? All at once in one incident that happened. So I turned it off, turned it back on, everything was fine. It was back to normal. And then about 30 seconds of running after that, it started misfiring again, back to the lights on the dash. And I was like, all right, well, it's not good. Since I had just done the, IMS, all this stuff to it, I sort of knew that the coil packs were fine. They had been just replaced recently. I mean, all my indicators pointed to, you're probably going to find metal in the oil filter, so you better just dump the oil. Because what is it? It's $50 to go get an oil change.
Have you noticed any
with it?
Oil consumption?
Oh, so oil consumption issues was inherent on this car. This car, from about 80,000 miles all the way through, it would every once in a while burn some oil, or it would chug it down about a quart every 1,000 miles. So it's still sort of within the spec. It is, for sure, 100%. I mean, and I knew this too because I had a Subaru STI that I blew up the engine 4 times on. And it cracked the piston between the rings. It gets too hot. It's another issue, but it's still a boxer engine. It still sort of has the same inherent flaws, right? And so, I mean, my thought was, calculating costs. I was like, okay, well, I could check this, but I don't want to pull the engine. I can't really see a lot, from these coil packs. I was like, whatever, $50 in oil, it'll put my mind at peace, or I will know right away exactly what's happening, right? Yeah. And so I dumped the oil. The oil looked okay. I mean, the oil itself, and I dropped the pan too, and I looked in the pan.
How many miles did you have on the oil at this point when you were
400 miles.
Okay,
so it was still yellow.
But it had turned color. It was not dark.
Exactly. It was still very fresh. It looked fresh. Looked real fresh. So I dumped it. It looked fine. I was like, okay, I'll drop the pan, and I will cut open the filter and take a look. And it really, the outside of the filter looked fine. But once you cut it and pulled it apart, that's when you can see in the veins the little bits of flakes here and there. And I was like, well, that's it. I was like, it sucks because it's such a, relatively minor little thing that it's got going on.
Metal in the filter.
Yep.
The signs were there.
The signs were all there. And I knew the oil consumption already. I was like, this engine's probably not super long for this world, but you got to throw the dice at some point and go, well, I'll put $3,000 into it of clutch and flywheel and stuff. That doesn't really affect the engine. I could still keep it, possibly rebuild it, right? If that was the case, it's really just a money proposition when it comes to that. Yeah. And that's why I looked at the oil and I was like, well, I know exactly what it is now. And I knew it was bore score too, because I was like, it's not the IMS.
You had a fresh IMS bearing.
There was that shred of doubt since I did it all myself. There was did I install it wrong? Was the timing wrong? And I go, well, the timing couldn't have been wrong because it ran fine.
We just looked at the bearing. The bearing is fine.
The bearing is perfect. It's brand new, essentially. And it ran fine for 400 miles. So I'm like, it's had some running time, where it's sat in the right spot. It wasn't like awkward. I mean, I've known the car for a long time. I know how it runs. I know how it sounds. Well, and the real sad part is my dad had done, at about 100,000 miles, a Blackstone test of the oil. He was, pedantic about the oil because he knew about the consumption. He knew about those issues. So he was monitoring it. The Blackstone report had basically said everything was within spec. Like, normally you would see stuff like that. They didn't catch, there was no metal. But there was also no plastics or anything like that. That wasn't high either. After I had dropped the sump, it all looked pretty good until you got it to the very last little bit and kind of moved it around and you can see a little shimmer. And there was no like large chunks. It wasn't like a, real catastrophic disaster. But
some of those that he drops, it's just glitter.
Yes, and that's what I expected to find, honestly. I was like, if this is in the filter, then it's everywhere. So, the filter does work. It was doing what it was supposed to do. It was catching all of it that was running through the system. Well, and what was real interesting about this versus like my Subaru engine that was failing was the Subaru was 1 cylinder. Everything else was fine. It was number 4. Everybody knows it with the Subaru. That's the one that fails because of starvation. This, every single piston was at some stage of failing with the coating. It was flaking off to some degree. It may not have scored the cylinder yet, but it was all...
Every cylinder.
Every single one was failing. Yeah, unfortunately. And, you know, we've got some plans to make some real power out of it now. And I'm just happy that it's going to go to a cause that, you know, someone can learn from it. You know, they can do what I did with this car, right?
So
I learned how to drive. I learned how to work on it. You know, it's really a big learning experience for me, and I'm glad to be able to give it to somebody to learn as well.
Well, for everybody that's wondering what we're going to be doing with this engine, here's our plan right now. Here we're in April of 2021. Our plan is we have an intern, sophomore in college at military background, new Jake's a Marine, as you know. And he's very interesting. He's like me. He's an enthusiast. Wants to learn more about these engines. So he's going to be coming on this summer as an internship. So Jake and I want to resurrect this engine. We want to reconstruct this engine, but he's going to be the person that's going to go through it, and he's going to use our M9X video series to guide him through the process. Of course, under the watchful eye of Jake Ravy, which is the best person on the planet if you ever doing this, if you have him to be able to turn to. Now, if that doesn't work out, you know, who knows what we're going to do, but we want to bring this thing back to life. And I know that you have plans. Matt's going to put another engine in this, and I know that it's going to live again. And I look at that car, and I think it's such a beautiful car. And the cool thing about this, I don't know if you know this, Matt, is these things have starting to increase in demand.
Oh yeah.
I don't know if you've been looking at auction, especially.
You know, it's entertaining to look at for me, but it really doesn't mean much, honestly, because this has so much sentimental value that it's a death car, as I would say. It only changes hands in death, and so it's fun for me to do whatever it takes to get it running again and enjoy it.
So Matt's gonna put another engine in this, and then we get his original engine, and we're gonna bring this thing back to life. And I'm excited because it. I'm kind of a hoarder. I'm very sentimental with a lot of stuff. So I think it's super cool that, you know, you shared your story about your dad, man, and you're going to hold on to this car and keep it going, and maybe someday you pass it on to someone else in your family.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening.